Hey everyone, Catch 'em All Collectibles here. Today's video is going to be a pretty quick one. You probably don't believe me, but the duration of the video should speak for itself. I'm wearing a black shirt, Black Label Day. Quick follow-up from last week's video. If you missed that one, it will be linked above. I had a 20% Black Label rate on Nagaba Evolutions. I mentioned in that video I would follow up. And I posed the question, am I good at grading? Am I good at pre-grading? Or am I lucky? I mentioned in that video, I leaned towards the fact that I was probably lucky for that instance. Low sample size so far. It's a fairly new promo. We don't have a ton of them graded yet, but the Black Label rate was hovering around, I want to say 8 to 10% on most of them, with about 20, 30, 40 graded on each. So pretty low sample size, but yeah, smashed it out of the park, more than doubling the Black Label rate last week, 20% Black Labels. Recent return came. I'm not going to do it the whole return video, show them all, mostly because it was the same size submission, almost 200 cards. Guess how many in the comments below. Pause quickly, guess. 2 Black Labels, 1% Black Label rate. I will say I pre-graded hundreds to thousands of these cards. I sent, as I went through the whole hierarchy, the best condition ones to BGS for the Black Label, the next best to CGC for the Pristine, and then the lowest to PSA. Again, go to that video above if you want the whole 20-minute video covering all of it, which cards I send, where, and why. But these cards were the same quality cards, largely speaking. I mean, obviously, overall, individually, they were different cards, but they were the same put into that high tier, high pre-grade. Definitely some amount of luck, and this isn't just a BGS thing. I think it is exacerbated at BGS because you're dealing with such small resolution, getting to the BGS 10, getting to a smaller subset of cards. When you lump in 80 to 90% of a given promo into the PSA 10 Gem Mint slot, you're going to have the variation hurting you less. When you're chasing something that's only 8 to 10% of the time, Black Label Nagabas, you're going to have a little bit more plus or minus, I guess. I guess the highs will be higher, the lows will be lower. I mean, I might be kind of lucky I got any at all, getting 2. And I'm going to go into a couple little different rants here about the different grading companies, and I'm not even sure what I'll title this video. It's just kind of a summation of what I've been saying for years. I mean, several years predating my time on YouTube. I've long been critical of grading companies, and stay tuned till the end because I might turn it on its head at the very end, and one might think I place all the blame on the grading companies, but we'll see how I wrap this all up in conclusion. So yeah, it's hit or miss depending on the day. Again, it's a human on the other end. There are certain companies out there, Tag, not Ace, AGS, Tag and AGS, technology assisted grading, and then automated grading system, I believe it's called. Both using robotics, both using, they call it AI grading. I think it's more like computational grading. Anyways, that might come up in a different video. But I've intended at some point to try those companies, but I've still not given them a chance yet. But yeah, all 3 companies ultimately have applications. And I think anyone who does this full time with a profit motive, as I do, that says you have to go with PSA, you have to go with BGS, you have to go with CGC, they're the best, XYZ. All companies have their problems, all companies have their cons, and all companies have their pros. One of the pros of Beckett is the Black Label. One of the cons towards them is paying up front and the randomness that goes into getting that Black Label. I promise you, that same randomness exists with PSA. When you're dealing with ultra modern, something like the Nagaba, something like I would call, link above, participation trophy, here, PSA 10, one that has 80, 90% plus PSA 10 rates with very little pre-grading, if any. When you're dealing with those, it's not as evident. But if you're dealing with WotC cards that fresh out of the pack often exist on the boundary of 8 to 9 quality or 9 to 10 quality, the same randomness exists. No one has the time or the capital or cares enough to spend the money to grade the same. What you would have to do, you would have to grade 1,000 cards with one company 100 times separately. Different days, different graders. The reproducibility of these grading companies would be, in my opinion, poor relative to what the market rates are. And I'll get back on that in a minute. But I've always said plus or minus 1. When you're dealing with BGS, plus or minus 1, I mean, technically, say 9.5 plus or minus 1. Well, that gets you up to a black label. That gets you down to an 8.5. On any given day, depending on the grader, depending on what's going on that day, depending on your luck, 99% of the time, 99.9% of the time, they're plus or minus 1. Probably 80% of the time, they're hitting the proper grade. What is the proper grade? I mean, certain cards, it's fairly straightforward. It's more straightforward. The less buckets there are to put the card into, the more straightforward it is. I mean, PSA does technically have half grades, but if you look at the pop report, they're barely utilizing the half grade whatsoever. They're pretty much 1 through 10 whole numbers only, except for if they're really not liking you that day, they'll throw a half grade at you. But yeah, when there's only 10 buckets for the PSA grader to put them in, naturally, their reproducibility is going to be a bit higher than a CGC, who has the half grades, than a BGS especially, who has the subgrades, which creates thousands of different grade combinations amongst the whole scale 1 to 10, including the premier 10, right? The black label. So yeah, the consistency is lacking at all companies, in my opinion, for my comfort level. I come from a background, get ready to fill out your bingo card. I come from a background of very precise measurements, measuring masses down to the thousandth of a gram, having reproducibility of burettes and things like that, having hundreds of milliliters, hundreds of grams, thousands of grams, having those things matter. Whereas what we have here is you grade a card and it's a 9, you grade it again and it's a 10, you grade it again and it's an 8. It's all over the place. We're never going to get internal data. I would love if someone works at one of these companies and they actually monitor the internal data. You probably can't leave it in the comments. Shoot me a DM. Like, if that's, I mean, it would stay, DMs are DMs, they stay private. But yeah, I'd actually be really interested. And if I ever had the ear of a grading card company, actually, now that I think about it, I have talked to Matt Quinn a couple times at Collecticons. Next time, I'll have to ask him if they do any kind of internal measurements. I'm sure the answer you would get is yes, there's something that goes on and they wouldn't be able to share it. Or if they did, it would be much higher precision than I would actually believe they have accuracy precision. But yeah, and anyways, all three companies are going to have some variability. The biggest thing, I'm at the level now where, and I'm not even just the level, because what I used to do years ago was much smaller level and the stakes were much higher. If I'm ripping a box and I only get one base unlimited Charizard in there, whether that 9s or 10s, it makes a much bigger difference. If I'm grading 50 of this Charizard promo from the recent premium collection, it doesn't matter as much, because one, I might put in 51 submission, 20 the next submission, another 30 the next submission. It's all going to average out. The more large number submissions, the larger number of larger quantity submissions you have, you're going to get the long-term average. So I have Nagabas across 5, 6, 7 submissions at BGS already. I did them across several submissions at CGC and PSA. Overall, as long as the play is plus EV at the time that I'm making it, I'm going to average out to where it all works out fine. Certain people have their theories, send them all at once. No, send smaller submissions in case you get a bad grader. Well, what if you get a good grader? What if you get 40 black labels out of 200 cards? You'll have wished you sent a big submission then, right? So I don't think the small submission, the big submission, I don't think submitting this in front of that, XYZ, certain layering your order in the proper order, I don't believe in any of those. I'm just at the point where more of what I'm doing is grading high quantities of cards, and as long as I'm sending the right stuff, high popular species, high liquidity species, it's going to work out. As long as I do, again, plus EV plays, iterate on it many, many times, and my average black label rate as it stands, 20%, 1%, I'm at about 10%. I'm at the high range of 8 to 10% for what everyone has been achieving. I think that's the way it's going to go. I mean, I might plug in a live down the line. I probably won't do another standalone video. But yeah, and one interesting thing I wanted to comment on, the Black Label Premium. It's absolutely crazy right now. I have a lot of my Black Labels headed to the eBay Vault. Shout out to my eBay Vault consignment service. Link in the description if you want to get your cards sold by me through my eBay Vault. 5% fee, $25 minimum fee, $250 minimum value of the card, of which the Black Label EV Nagabas land in. Obviously, you got PSA and CGC 40, 50 bucks, somewhere in that vicinity for the pristines and the gem mints. But yeah, the black labels are earning hundreds of dollars. One thing that I think is an interesting dynamic, a lot of the prices are buoyed by these companies we have to deal with. I mean, again, I'm very critical of the grading card companies in many instances. If people know, I mean, if you follow me on YouTube, if you used to follow me on E4, I'm pretty critical of the grading card companies. this is where I alluded to earlier. I'm going to turn it on its head. A lot of it's our fault, I think. A lot of it, I mean, maybe more me. At this point, I've come to understand what I'm dealing with. I no longer get frustrated when I get 1% black labels. Or, I mean, I still get happy when I get 20% black labels, but I just know 1% black label submissions, it's part of the game. It's part of the game. Now I have all these extra slabs I've got to get rid of. I've got to move through them. And to get to that, the thing that buoys the whole submission, the thing that brings home all the bacon out of that submission. It's just, it's part of it. And honestly, prices are buoyed. Prices are higher on the market for these cards because of who we have to dealing with CGC, dealing with PSA, dealing with BGS, dealing with all these. I mean, the average consumer of a graded card, they're afraid to ship stuff in the mail because they fear things being lost. They don't want to pay BGS thousands of dollars up front. I mean, 200 cards, that was about a $3,000 submission I paid up front 3 months ago, and now I get 1% black labels. So a lot of the prices for these cards, I think it's more extreme with a company like BGS, who's kind of seen as the worst one to submit to, and that again keeps people from sending to them, and it keeps less black labels entering the market because less cards are just being sent to them because people know what they are up against, know what they're gonna have to deal with. And if the prices, I mean, going more to like a PSA, I know I'm kind of all over the place. PSA, BGS, CGC. If a PSA were to go sub 10 again, if a CGC were to go significantly $5, $6, $7, somewhere way down there, like where they probably could be profitable, and if they were to become a week turnaround, 2 week turnaround, that's going to hurt the prices on a lot of these cards. So it's an interesting dynamic where, yeah, you kind of want lower grading prices, you kind of want quicker turnaround times, but you don't want them too quick. You don't want them too low. It's an interesting dynamic. And again, I kind of started towards this conclusion that I'm going to end on. I used to place a lot more fault on the grading companies because it's like, hey, a PSA 9 for a base unlimited Charizard is $1,000 and a PSA 10 is $10,000. PSA didn't make that happen. BGS didn't make black label Nagabas $500. The market did. I think a lot of it is like our fault, our cumulative us as a market. It's our fault. The prices are the sum of all of our opinions on what the value should be, right? So market price is just determined by all the market participants. And in my opinion, as a consumer of the product, I was always a PSA 9 guy because I found the most value there. I never understood the PSA 9, the PSA 10 premium. That was 7-8 years ago when the PSA 10 premium was significantly lower. Now this whole black label premium, I am so far removed from that as a buyer, as a consumer. It's the market. And I think the market is just, for me at least, again, we are all individuals. We all need to individually determine how much we value these things. But yeah, it's not really, the way that I see it today, I'm selling a product. I deal with these companies because I owe it to myself as a business, right? To earn the highest income. And I think there is a valid, it's a legitimate product that people legitimately enjoy. I just don't understand the high premium of the highest grades when they lack the reproducibility. But from a consumer standpoint, or from the business standpoint, the producer standpoint, I should say, from the producer standpoint of the grading card company, why would I improve my reproducibility when I'm doing record submissions? Why would I lower my costs? Why would I improve, even going to Pokemon, I've talked about this many times. Why would I improve my product when people are buying 10 billion cards a year from me? Why would I improve my product as PSA and increase my consistency? Why would I micromanage all my individual graders and make sure they all grade plus or minus 0.5? Like a lot tighter, a lot more precise, a lot more accurate. Maybe test every grader every week. Send them 100 cards, send the same 100 cards to everybody, and then send it to them a month later. And anyone who doesn't get within a certain range, fire them, retrain them, whatever it may be. Why would I do that when the consumer doesn't care? Like, we've accepted with it. We're voting with our wallets that the low quality Pokemon cards that are being put out, hard to grade, like, we're accepting that. We're voting with our wallets cumulatively that it's all fine. And I can't blame the grading card. I used to blame the grading card companies a lot more. I can't really blame them as much anymore because they're just doing what a business would do in their situation. I mean, they're maximizing profit, and it's a reasonable product. It's a reasonable product. All the harsh things I've said over the years, all the things I'll continue to say in the future, they're doing as much or more than they need to do to please the consumer. So it's like, how can you fault them? How can you fault them when we're eating it up and the end consumer is eating it up? I'm just kind of like a middleman, right? I'm a middleman. I grade with these companies and then I move it on to its final consumer. So yeah, a little bit of a rant, a little bit of a ramble. It went a little bit longer than I thought, but under 16 minutes for a Catch 'em All Collectibles video. That's pretty solid. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. It'll be interesting to see if anyone has any extreme thoughts on this or if I made any sense whatsoever. Anyways, I appreciate you all watching. I will catch you all later.